Well, fair and balanced. Back now to the controversy over the Dakota Access Pipeline, and Congressman Kevin Cramer gearing up for a meeting about it with President-elect Trump just moments from now. Congressman Cramer is our guest. Congressman, I know you had an opportunity to listen to our report from William LaJeunesse as well as our interview with Billy Mills, who's part of the group that is protesting this pipeline. What's your reaction, not only to the latest news about the pipeline being stopped, but what you heard as well from Billy?
Well, first of all, Jen, I'm very disappointed, of course, in the decision by the Army Corps of Engineers, because this is a reversal of a previous decision. The important thing to remember here is this is a legally permitted pipeline. I spent 10 years permitting pipelines as a North Dakota Public Service Commissioner, including the original Keystone pipeline. And this pipeline has followed all the rules, all the laws. It's received over 200 federal permits in other parts of the country, and now all that remains in North Dakota is crossing this river.
Congressman, if I could, can I just stop you just for a moment there, because it's a very difficult story to follow in some cases with all the different permits. Just to be 100% clear, the area that the Army Corps of Engineers said, no, you cannot build on, essentially, was an area that previously had the green light to be built on?
They had what's called a 408 permit from the Corps of Engineers. Then when the President decided to step in, the Corps of Engineers rescinded that 408 permit, and the only other piece of paper they need is an easement to actually do the work on that land there. That easement had been drafted, has been sitting on the commander's desk in Omaha for 3 or 4 months, and that's what this is all about. But I also want to say that I think what Billy Mills was talking about and what many of the North Dakota tribal members have talked about are legitimate questions. The problem is that their legitimate concerns and their prayerful, peaceful protest has been co-opted by people whose agenda has nothing to do with sacred sites or, frankly, the water in the Missouri River. It has everything to do with keeping oil in the ground, and that confusion, I think, is what's created so much of the chaos. Okay,
I'll ask you the same question I asked him. What opportunity do you see for compromise? What is the solution here?
Well, you know, when you don't get compromise, you don't get consensus, somebody has to make a decision. In this case, the law has been followed by the pipeline company. I do think, however, prospectively, there's room for a lot of consultation, a lot more, government to government, if you will, bridge building, discussion about things going forward. But I just think that after $4 billion has been spent and a pipeline's all but done is a kind of a bad time to change the rules. And really, you're changing the rules after the game is over. So I think if we can get this part of it behind us and get moving forward, we can look at some solutions. But as far as this pipeline goes, rerouting it, I don't even know how you'd do that. You'd have to go up the shoreline on one side of the river and cross a bridge or something, come back down the shoreline on the other side, and that'd be far more imposing on sacred lands and certainly on the federal lands than anything that they'd be doing going 90 to 115 feet below the riverbed, which is what the current plan has.
And so one of the things that the tribe has said is that, we're a sovereign nation, and I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, we're a sovereign nation. Sure. This project is infringing upon our ability to make decisions for ourselves and to protect our people in the way that we want to protect them, which is that we don't want a pipeline going underneath this water, and we're a sovereign nation, and we should be able to say no. To that, and that's a very deep argument, as you heard from Billy. It goes back years and years and years. So how do we have a modern solution to it? Learning from it, the past.
There are already at least a dozen petroleum pipelines in that spot in north, all that are upstream from Standing Rock Sioux tribe. And so now, like I said, now is a funny time to change the rules of the game. Their sovereignty has to do, by the way, and it's imposed on them or allowed to them by Congress. That sovereignty has to do with how they govern themselves. They're not a foreign nation. They're not a state. They're sovereign in terms of their own self-governance. Just to be clear, this pipeline is not going on the reservation. This is off of the reservation in an existing corridor where there's already a gas pipeline and a high-voltage transmission line. That's why this was the least intrusive route that the company could have picked. Well, so there are a lot of facts that are getting confused.
And I appreciate the fact that you mentioned that, because the land that's involved, just so our viewers know, there's federal land involved where the protests are happening. There's private land involved where the protests are happening. It crisscrosses a lot of different boundaries, which is why it's a complicated story, quite frankly, Congressman, to kind of wrap your head around. Although important, as we're looking ahead to what does energy policy look like in the United States of America. On that, quickly, you're meeting with President-elect Trump. I'm just curious about the process of this in general. as soon as he comes into office, can he reverse easily the decision made by the Army Corps of Engineers, and then the green light is green once again to continue to build this, no matter the protests?
Well, he's said he's going to take a thorough look at it, and that's an appropriate response at this point because it is a lot to wrap your mind around. However, all he really has to do is say, this isn't the president's decision. This is up to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And if he gives that green light to the Corps of Engineers in the Omaha district, for example, they'll issue that easement right away, I'm quite certain. So it's very unusual for a president to impose himself on something as technical as this and to override the administrative agency that's followed the law. By the way, a judge in the D.C. Circuit that was appointed by Barack Obama and then a 3-judge panel on the appellate court in D.C. have upheld the legality of this pipeline. So you know, for Billy Mills and others that want to challenge treaties and those things, that's fine and appropriate, and you ought to do that in court. But you don't get to burn land and destroy farmers' livings and harass children and slash tires and burn equipment and trespass anywhere you want to trespass to make that point. We have a system, a judicial system, that should take that up. And I'm not accusing Billy Mills or, frankly, even Standing Rock of doing that. But they've been co-opted by a very different element than they represent. And consequently, Jenna, the tragedy is their legitimate questions have been diluted by this other argument that's come into play.
It's a fascinating story, and obviously a lot of emotion on both sides. Congressman, it's nice to have your expertise, and we look forward to having you back as well as we watch this process and see where it goes from here. Thank you for the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, President